The combat base at Khe Sanh was built around a 3,900-foot airstrip. Beside the strip was the Marine Air Traffic Control Unit. Nearby was the 26th Marine Command Post and the Fire Support Coordination Center. At the eastern end of the base was the main ammunition dump, with a secondary dump to the west. The base perimeter was manned by the 1st Battalion and a company of the 3rd. There was also a forward operating base run by Special Forces. The infantry were backed by tank and anti-tank units and an artillery battalion of the 13th Marines. Outside the Khe Sanh base, the Marines held Hill 881 South, Hill 861, and a radio relay station on Hill 950. The whole 2nd Battalion occupied Hill 558 to block the Rao Quan River Valley. Beyond 881 South, the North Vietnamese 325C Division had secretly fortified a chain of hills. On January 20th, 1968, the Americans thwarted an attempt to take 881 South, and just after midnight the next day, 861 was partially overrun, but the attackers were also driven off. At 5:30 a.m., Khe Sanh base itself was hammered by a massive North Vietnamese artillery bombardment. The shattering barrage of shells, mortars, and rockets, which slammed into the Marine combat base at 0530 on January 21st, signaled the start of the battle for Khe Sanh. The North Vietnamese gunners had targeted their bombardment with unerring accuracy. As Marines had dived for cover, one of the first rounds had scored a direct hit on the main ammunition store. The number 1 dump stored 1,500 tons of artillery and mortar rounds, 90% of the base's entire stock, or 10,000 rounds. All of it was lost. 18 men were killed instantly and 40 were wounded as the ammunition exploded and shells and mortar rounds flew in every direction. The explosions would go on for another 48 hours. Even at the height of the chaos, the Marines were still able to fire their mortars and guns against the enemy batteries. They also called in air support, and very quickly, fighter bombers were blasting the suspected locations of the North Vietnamese artillery, which in return scored 300 direct heavy artillery hits on the firebase. As the bombardment of the base reached a crescendo, the 26th Marines commander, Colonel David Lowndes, expected a massive North Vietnamese ground attack at any moment. But the attack didn't come. The North Vietnamese infantry had a different objective. The target was Khe Sanh village, 3 miles from the Marine combat base. At dawn on January 21st, NVA troops attacked Khe Sanh village, where 200 Marines and South Vietnamese troops were stationed. The North Vietnamese attackers were a 400-man battalion of the 66th Regiment. The battalion attacked twice, but in the face of powerful American artillery and airstrikes, failed to take the village. An attempt at reinforcement by a South Vietnamese unit went disastrously wrong, and the whole force was destroyed. Later in the day, the village was evacuated and abandoned to the NVA. Later that evening, Khe Sanh base itself was probed by a North Vietnamese assault unit. L Company of the 3rd Battalion drove off the attack. The following day, the base's western flank was reinforced by the newly arrived 1st Battalion of the 9th Marines, deployed at a quarry a mile from the perimeter. A platoon was detached from the battalion to occupy the nearby hill 64. For the Marines inside the Khe Sanh base, the days were now filled with feverish activity. There were sudden heavy bombardments from NVA guns and rockets. The massive damage done by the first barrage still had to be repaired. The biggest worry was ammunition. The first aircraft to land all carried shells. More than 130 tons were delivered in just 2 days. Reinforcements arrived too. The Marines were joined by 300 South Vietnamese Army Rangers, and Colonel Lowndes now had more than 6,000 men inside the compound and in 7 defended positions on the surrounding hills. While the Marines at Khe Sanh braced themselves for the attack that was surely coming, General Westmoreland warned Washington that the battle could be the turning point of the whole war. In the United States, President Johnson was getting more and more worried about what might happen. The last thing he wanted was an American version of Dien Bien Phu, but he was determined to support his commander. Westmoreland would be allowed to fight the battle he wanted. There would be no U.S. withdrawal from Khe Sanh, despite the fact that the NVA were still raining between 150 and 300 shells a day on Khe Sanh.